It was a suffocating morning in the small town of Uttar Pradesh, the kind that made the air feel heavy, like a wet cloth draped over your skin. The streets shimmered with heat even before noon. Bicycles rattled over cracked roads, and the sound of vendors shouting blended with distant temple bells. Mansi Pandey, 19 years old, adjusted the braid that fell neatly over her shoulder. She slipped into a simple blue kurti, checked herself in the small mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, and told her mother she was going to visit a friend. Nothing unusual. She wasn't the kind of girl who broke rules. Quiet, polite, predictable. She never missed curfew, never spoke out of turn, never gave her parents a reason to worry. She smiled as she stepped out of the house. "Come back soon," her mother reminded her, the same way she always did. Mansi nodded. She always came back. But that day, she didn't. When the sun dipped behind the fields and shadows stretched long, her absence began to prick at her mother's nerves. At first, it was just a glance at the clock. Then another. A phone call. Another. No answer. Her phone rang for hours, then abruptly went dead. By midnight, the thin thread of hope frayed into panic. The next morning, her parents walked to the local police station, clutching each other's hands, speaking fast, desperate. They wanted someone, anyone, to say it was all just a misunderstanding. But the officers barely looked up from their desks. "She must have eloped," one said flatly. "Girls her age do this all the time." Mansi's parents froze. Eloped? Their daughter? Her books, her ID, her clothes, everything was still in her room. She hadn't taken a single rupee. She wasn't that girl. And yet, the police kept insisting. But then there was Mansi Pandey, her uncle, her mother's younger brother, a man everyone trusted. He was different. When neighbors came to offer comfort, he stood in the corner, arms crossed, silent. He didn't search the fields like the others. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even look angry. He was there but detached, present but distant. And when someone asked him what he thought had happened, his answer was cold, flat. She must have run away. No grief, no urgency, just that same dead-eyed response. Police finally started pulling phone records, CCTV footage, and tower pings. A name appeared again and again in the data. Mansi Pandey. He had called Mansi repeatedly before she vanished. His phone had been in the same area as hers until it suddenly went dark. And the last CCTV clip of her alive showed her walking, not alone, with him. And that's when the story stopped being about a missing girl. It became something much darker. At first, even with the evidence mounting, people in town resisted believing it. Mansi Pandey wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. He was family. The man who brought sweets during festivals. The uncle who had once taken Monty to school on his old motorcycle. The one who smiled shyly at neighbors and touched elders' feet for blessings. But the digital trail didn't lie. The closer investigators looked, the more they found. Late-night calls, frequent texts, and a pattern of contact that wasn't casual. This wasn't an uncle checking in on his niece. This was something else entirely. And then came the revelation no one wanted to believe. Mansi and her uncle had been in a secret relationship. It had started when she was only 17. What began as attention, small compliments, little gifts, slowly became something darker. Something she didn't know how to stop. For 2 years, they hid it. At weddings, during temple visits, at family gatherings, they smiled like nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, there were messages, promises, and manipulation. Maybe some relatives knew. Maybe they didn't want to know. In small towns, silence is often easier than shame. But Mansi was changing. She was no longer the quiet girl who followed every rule. College had opened her world. She made new friends, laughed louder, and began to talk about her dreams. Finishing her degree, getting a job, maybe even moving to the city. She wanted freedom. She wanted a life. And she had met someone. A boy her age, kind, respectful, normal. For Mansi, that was the beginning of the end. His control over her, something he had mistaken for love, was slipping. He wasn't ready to lose it. As Mansi began pulling away, Mansi's calm exterior cracked. He started calling her obsessively, leaving long messages filled with guilt, anger, and threats. "If you leave me, "I'll kill myself," one message read. "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me?" This wasn't heartbreak. It was entitlement. To him, Monty wasn't a person anymore. She was something he believed he owned. He began showing up near her college, lingering in alleys, calling from unknown numbers, and even asking relatives to convince her to come back. One afternoon, near a temple, he cornered her. "I can't live without you," he pleaded. "Don't do this to me." But Monty was done being afraid. "I don't love you," she told him. "I never did. I want to live my life. Please leave me alone." Each boundary she set made him spiral deeper. Days without eating. Nighttime calls where he cried, threatened self-harm, and blamed her for his despair. But then came the message that would seal her fate. "If you marry someone else, I swear, I won't let that happen. If I can't have you, no one will." By July 2022, Monty had made her decision. She wasn't going to let him control her anymore. She told her family she was meeting a friend, picked up her small purse, and walked out with quiet determination. She didn't know that Mansi Pandey had already made his decision too. He wasn't coming to talk. He wasn't coming to beg. He was coming to end it. The meeting place was an isolated lane on the outskirts of town, a road lined with overgrown fields, where people rarely passed during the day. Eyewitnesses later said they saw them together, voices raised, faces tense. She told him it was over. For good. She turned to leave. That's when he lunged. His hands, those same hands that had once handed her sweets as a child, wrapped around her neck. She fought, clawed, and gasped for air, but he didn't stop. In less than a minute, Mansi Pandey's life was gone, and Mansi Pandey stood over her, trembling, not with regret, but with a chilling, hollow calm. He had taken back the control he believed was his. When it was over, Mansi didn't run. He didn't scream. He didn't collapse in shock. Instead, he crouched down, smashed Mansi's phone against a rock, and hurled the pieces into the rushing waters of the nearby canal. Without her phone, without her digital trail, maybe it would look like she had simply disappeared or eloped, just like he had already been telling anyone who asked. He dragged her body toward a patch of dense brush near the fields, covering her with dry leaves and loose soil. Not buried deep, just hidden enough to buy himself time. Then he walked home. Neighbors would later say he seemed normal, too normal. He even joined Mansi's parents later that night as they sat outside, waiting for news. "She'll come back," he said quietly. "Maybe she's angry. Maybe she's with friends. But truth doesn't stay buried." Days turned to nights, and Mansi's absence became undeniable. Her friends began posting frantic messages online, begging anyone for information. They told police the same thing over and over. She wasn't planning to run away. She wasn't seeing anyone secretly. She wanted to finish college. Something's wrong. Investigators, pressured by the growing outcry, began to dig deeper. CCTV footage surfaced from a small roadside shop. It was grainy, but clear enough to show Monty walking with a man in a dark shirt and cap. The timestamp matched her last phone activity. When enhanced, the man's profile matched Mansi Pandey. With the CCTV footage in hand, investigators shifted their focus entirely to Mansi Pandey. They subpoenaed phone records, traced tower pings, and reconstructed a timeline. Every piece pointed to him. While Mansi had claimed he was at work the day Monty vanished, his phone data betrayed him. Pings placed him miles away, right near the isolated road where she was last seen. The calls between them were relentless, dozens over the days leading up to her disappearance, including one that lasted 27 minutes, just an hour before she vanished. The net tightened. Mansi was brought in for questioning. At first, he was calm, too calm. He repeated the same story. "She ran away. I don't know where she went." But detectives knew the pattern. They'd seen it before. People who think they're smarter than evidence. And evidence doesn't bluff. Interrogators confronted him with the CCTV stills, the call logs, the shopkeeper's statement. His carefully rehearsed calm began to crack. He stumbled. He changed timelines. He contradicted himself. Then came the testimony of a local shopkeeper. "I saw them together," he told police. She looked upset. He looked angry. 3 days in, something inside him broke. He slumped forward, his voice low. She said she didn't love me anymore. She said she was going to marry someone else. I couldn't take it. There it was. The confession. He admitted he had lured Mansi out for one last talk, argued with her. And when she tried to leave, he snapped. I didn't mean to, he muttered. But I couldn't let her go. But he had meant to. Every piece of evidence said so. Once the confession was secured, the search for Mansi's body began. Monty, under police escort, led them to the overgrown field at the edge of town. The air was heavy, the ground brittle with heat. There, under a thin layer of dry leaves and soil, they found her. The moment news broke, crowds gathered. Some wept. Others shouted in anger. Parents held their daughters closer. Women in the town whispered, if this could happen in their family, it could happen in ours. For Mansi's parents, the discovery was unbearable. Her mother collapsed. Her father, silent and pale, refused to look at Monty as police dragged him away in handcuffs. Neighbors said later, it was like watching someone realize the enemy was in their own house all along. The case exploded in the media. News anchors called it a crime that shattered trust. Student groups protested outside the police station. Placards read, "Justice for Monty. Stop protecting abusers. Silence kills." People weren't just angry about Mansi's death. They were angry about the years of secrecy, the police's initial dismissal, the cultural pressure that taught girls to endure instead of speak. In court, Mansi Pandey stood silent, his head bowed as prosecutors laid out every piece of evidence. The phone records, the CCTV footage, the confession, the testimonies of Mansi's friends. The judge's words were sharp, cutting through the packed courtroom. You were supposed to protect her. Instead, you betrayed her, her family, and your society. You were guilty of murder. The sentence, life imprisonment. Outside, the crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in a raw mix of relief and grief. Justice had come, but at a cost no one could undo. In the weeks after the verdict, Mansi's town was different. The same narrow lanes and faded walls remained, but something in the air had shifted. Conversations that had never been spoken aloud were now unavoidable. Parents sat their daughters down and asked questions they had once avoided. Is anyone bothering you? Do you feel safe? For some families, it was the first time those words had ever been said. Mansi's college held a candlelight vigil. Hundreds of students gathered, holding pictures of her smiling face. Professors stood in silence. Friends cried openly. She wanted to be a teacher, one classmate whispered to the crowd. She talked about helping girls stay in school, about changing things for them. She didn't deserve this. A mural appeared on a wall near her college gate. Mansi Pandey, 2003 to 2022. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Women's groups launched campaigns across Uttar Pradesh. Schools started offering workshops on consent, on boundaries, on recognizing signs of manipulation, even when it comes from family. Hotlines saw an increase in calls. Anonymous tips came flooding in from girls who had been silent for too long. Mansi's death was no longer just a tragedy. It had become a movement. But for her family, the pain didn't fade. Her mother couldn't bring herself to return to the home where she had raised her daughter. Her father refused interviews. And when someone asked Mansi's younger brother what justice looked like, he said quietly, "Justice will be having my sister back." Mansi Pandey now sits behind prison bars, stripped of the calm mask he once wore so easily. Outside, his name is no longer spoken with trust, but with disgust. The same community that once greeted him politely at the temple now uses his name as a warning. Monsters don't always come from the outside. Sometimes they grow inside your own home. Mansi's story echoes because it's not just hers. It's every girl who has been told to stay quiet to protect family honor. It's every parent who assumed safety because the dangers shared their last name. And yet, in the face of that darkness, change began. If you've listened this far, remember Mansi's name. Speak up for those who can't. Share her story, so no other girl's voice is silenced by fear, shame, or family secrets. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content daily, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.